The wind had a way of singing through the empty boards of Clara Hargrove's porch, long, hollow notes that echoed the years she had spent alone. Dust Creek wasn't much more than a dot on the edge of the frontier, but to Clara, it was the last place she had known any kind of real life. And real loss. People whispered about her, of course. The widow who stayed when everyone else left. The woman who talked to the wind like it answered back. The one whose eyes carried storms. But the truth was simpler, quieter, and far heavier. Clara stayed because leaving meant letting go of the last place her husband had ever stood. And after he'd been taken by the fever, she stayed because she simply didn't know how to do anything else. Grief had a way of freezing the world, trapping a person in the moment that hurt the most. Each morning, she rose before dawn. Not because she needed to, but because the silence that followed sunrise was unbearable. She fed the chickens she didn't need anymore, tended the garden that barely grew, and kept the rifle her husband left behind cleaned and ready, though she didn't remember the last time she had fired it. Life had become a shape without meaning, until the morning everything changed. It started with hoofbeats. Slow, steady, deliberate, too heavy to be passing riders, too controlled to be a drunk wanderer. Clara stiffened where she stood beside the water pump, fingers tightening involuntarily around the iron handle. Dust Creek rarely received visitors, and when it did, they came looking for trouble or shelter. Sometimes both. The rider came into view like a shadow forming out of the rising heat. A tall man, broad-shouldered, sitting a powerful bay stallion. His hat was pulled low, but even from a distance Clara sensed something dangerous in the way he carried himself. Not reckless danger, but the kind that lived in people who'd seen too much. Her breath caught. Please keep riding. Please. But he didn't. He slowed, then stopped. Right at the edge of her fence. Clara's heart thudded hard against her ribs as he dismounted, boots hitting the dirt with a heavy, grounded thump. She couldn't make out his face yet, only the dark outline of a man who looked carved from the same earth that baked beneath her feet. And then, without warning, the sound that turned her blood to ice. The metallic click of a revolver's hammer. Clara froze, breath trapping tight in her chest as the man moved behind her, silent, deliberate, controlled. And then she felt it. A hot gun barrel pressed against her back. Her knees nearly buckled. A tremor ran through her, fear surging up her spine, stealing her breath and her voice. For years she had lived alone in quiet safety, yet now, the world had narrowed to a single burning point, and the cold certainty that her life teetered on the edge of a trigger pull. "Don't scream," the man said, his voice low, deep enough to vibrate against her bones. She wanted to scream anyway. She wanted to run. But she couldn't move. Every muscle locked tight, frozen between terror and disbelief. "What do you want?" she whispered. For a long, terrible moment, he didn't answer. Then the gun eased, not away, but just enough to breathe. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said. "But I need you to stand still." Still? Still while a stranger held death across her spine? Her heart hammered so loudly she felt dizzy. She stared ahead at the pump handle and wondered if this was how her life ended, alone, unprepared, in the dusty morning light on land she clung to out of grief. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" The man's breath shifted, like he was looking past her instead of at her. "There's a rattler behind you," he said quietly. "Coiled up. Real close. Move wrong, and it's you or it." Clara's pulse stumbled. A rattlesnake. Her eyes widened as she struggled against the instinctive urge to jump, to spin, to run. But the man's hand steadied her shoulder, not rough, not forceful, but firm enough to ground her shaking limbs. "I'm gonna take care of it," he murmured. "But you gotta trust me for about 5 seconds more." Trust? In a stranger with a gun to her back? But something in his tone, not the words themselves, but the weight beneath them held a strange calm, a steadiness she hadn't felt in years. She heard it then. The faint, dry rattle from the dirt behind her. Too close. Far too close. Her breath hitched. The cowboy shifted. The gun lifted. A single shot cracked through the morning like lightning splitting the sky. Clara flinched hard, covering her ears instinctively as dust burst behind her. For a moment her hearing rang so sharply she thought the world had shattered. Then silence. Long, heavy silence. Until his voice, low, steady, broke through. "It's gone! You're all right." Clara turned sharply, breath burning in her lungs. The rattlesnake lay motionless in the dirt. And the cowboy, tall, dust-worn, and unexpectedly gentle-eyed beneath his hat, stood a few paces back, gun lowered at his side, his expression unreadable. He didn't look like a man who threatened widows. He looked like a man who had simply done what needed doing. She swallowed hard, voice barely stronger than a whisper. You saved me." He shook his head slightly. "No, ma'am. Just stepped in before trouble did." Then he holstered his gun, nodded once, and, shockingly, turned as if to leave. Just like that. No explanation. No apology. No introduction. Clara blinked, stunned. "Wait, don't go." He paused. And for the first time, Clara realized something unexpected. His shoulders sagged slightly, like a man carrying a burden too heavy to name. "I don't mean any harm," he said quietly. "I'm just passing through." But something in his voice felt wounded, wary, like a man running from ghosts she couldn't see. Clara took a slow breath. Her fear eased. Her loneliness sharpened. "If you saved my life," she said softly, "at least let me give you breakfast." The cowboy hesitated, then turned just enough that she saw the shadow of his face. A man with weary eyes. A week's worth of dust. And a hurt he didn't speak of. "Name's Colt," he finally said. "Colt Maddox." Then he stepped toward her porch, not knowing that this moment, the one born of danger and trembling fear, would soon unravel both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. And Clara, for the first time in years, didn't feel quite so alone. Colt Maddox sat at Clara's small wooden table like a man who hadn't rested in weeks. His hat lay beside his plate, the morning light revealing a face sharpened by hardship, cheekbones defined, jaw set, eyes that carried a wild mix of exhaustion and vigilance. He moved with the caution of someone who expected danger to greet him at every turn. Clara set down a plate of hot biscuits and eggs before him, doing her best to ignore the tremor still lingering in her hands. The memory of the gun barrel against her back returned in flashes. Fear, shock, the explosion of the gunshot. But each time she looked at Colt now, those feelings softened into something far more complicated. He had saved her life. He had risked his own in doing it. And now, sitting at her table, he looked almost lost. "You didn't have to do that," she said gently. Colt's gaze lifted just a little. "Ma'am, rattlers don't give second chances." "It's Clara," she corrected softly. He nodded, but his eyes drifted away again, scanning the windows and corners of the room like he was cataloging every possible threat. She wondered what kind of life carved such instincts into a person. After a moment, he spoke again. "Didn't mean to scare you like that. But you moved wrong, you'd been bit." Clara swallowed, emotions tangled between lingering fear and something close to gratitude. "I'm just glad you were here." Colt didn't respond. He ate like a man who had forgotten what a warm meal tasted like, quiet and efficient. Clara watched him for a moment, then turned back to the stove to hide the warmth rising in her chest. Silence lingered between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but thick with unspoken questions. Finally, Clara sat across from him and folded her hands. "You said you were just passing through. Yes, ma'am. Headed where? Colt paused mid-bite, jaw tense. For a moment, Clara thought he wouldn't answer, but then he sighed, leaning back slightly. Anywhere that ain't the place I came from. His tone was calm but filled with a weight she recognized too well. A person didn't speak like that unless the past had teeth. You don't have to tell me, she said gently. Colt looked down at his plate, then pushed it away half-finished, something no starving man would do unless his mind was too burdened to enjoy comfort. Trouble follows me, he said simply. Clara's breath stilled. He spoke the words plainly, without fear or pride. More like a fact of life. Like weather. Are you in some kind of danger? She asked carefully. Real men don't drag strangers into their storms, he replied. But Clara wasn't convinced. She had lived with loss long enough to recognize the look of someone haunted by something more than bad luck. Before she could respond, Colt stood. I should go. I appreciate the meal. He reached for his hat, but something, a shadow crossing his features, a flicker of pain, made him pause. His hand drifted to his side, just beneath the ribs. Clara noticed the way his fingers pressed there, slow and deliberate. Are you hurt? She asked. Colt didn't answer. His stance wavered, just slightly, but enough for Clara to see the truth. He wasn't just weary. He was injured. Sit down, she urged. I'm fine. You're not. He clenched his jaw, stubbornness written into the lines of his face. Just needs a day's rest. Clara stepped close, something protective rising in her chest. Colt, you saved my life. Let me help you. His eyes softened, the hard edges melting for the briefest moment. It was the first real emotion she'd seen from him. Why? He asked quietly. Why help a stranger? Clara swallowed. Because someone should. Her answer hung in the warm kitchen air. Simple. Honest. Undeniable. Slowly, Colt lowered himself back into the chair, breathing out like a man surrendering to something he didn't understand. Clara moved closer. Let me look at the injury. He hesitated, but unbuttoned his shirt enough for her to see the bandage wrapped around his ribs. Dried blood stained the cloth, dark and angry. She gasped softly. Colt, this wound is days old. Maybe worse. He grit his teeth, but said nothing. Who did this? She whispered. He looked away, jaw tight. Men who think a bullet can solve anything. Clara nodded, understanding more than he realized. Let me clean it. Please. Colt met her eyes, really met them, for the first time. There, beneath the rugged hardness and the survival instinct, was something unexpectedly gentle. All right, he said. If you're sure. I am. But as Clara began to gather water and cloth, she didn't see the figure far off in the distance, riders cresting the hill, dust clouds rising behind them. Men who were looking for Colt Maddox. Men who wouldn't hesitate to turn Dust Creek into a battleground. And Clara Hargrove, who had lived so long in quiet loneliness, had no idea her life was about to change forever. The midday sun hung low and hazy over Dust Creek, casting long, wavering shadows across Clara's small homestead. Inside, the quiet was warm and still, broken only by the soft clink of glass jars and Colt's faint, uneven breathing. Clara knelt beside him, wringing out the cloth she used to clean the wound. The bleeding had slowed, but the deep bruise beneath the bandage told the truth. He had been hit hard, maybe grazed by a bullet or slammed against something with violent force. No wonder he had ridden like a man half broken. You're lucky it didn't get infected, Clara murmured. Colt breathed a dry laugh. Luck's never followed me this far. It followed you to my doorstep, she said gently. He shifted, wincing. Not sure if that's good for you. Clara paused, cloth in hand, studying the man who had somehow walked straight out of danger and into her life. The hardened edges didn't hide the exhaustion smudge beneath his eyes, nor the loneliness built into his silence. "You don't get to decide that," she replied softly. Colt's gaze flicked toward her, surprised, uncertain, but instead of answering, he nodded once and let his eyes drift shut. For a few moments, Clara allowed herself to simply watch him. His breath slow. His shoulders no longer braced like a man expecting a fight. Something about him, despite the gun, the fear, the wound, felt steady. Familiar, even. But peace on the frontier never lasted long. A distant rumble rolled across the ground. Low, rhythmic, unmistakable. Hoofbeats. Colt's eyes snapped open before Clara even turned her head. His hand went to his holster, instinct taking over. But when he tried to stand, a sharp groan tore from his throat, and he dropped back onto the cot. "Don't," Clara whispered urgently. "You're hurt. They found me." Colt cut in, voice tight. "Clara, listen to me. You have to stay inside. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone." Fear pricked her spine. "Who found you?" Colt pulled himself upright with visible effort. "Men who think I took something from them." "Did you?" His jaw hardened. "Not the way they tell it." He staggered to the window, peering through the curtain. Clara stepped beside him and caught sight of the rising dust. 5 riders, dark silhouettes against the glaring sky, heading straight for her property. Her breath hitched. "Colt! You need to hide," he insisted, reaching for his gun even as his hand trembled. "These men ain't the kind that ask questions before shooting." Clara's heart pounded so hard it hurt. She'd been alone for years, but she had never felt the cold breath of danger quite like this. "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly. "You don't understand. I don't care who they are," she whispered. "You're wounded. I won't let them take you." Colt turned to her, something raw flickering in his eyes. Gratitude. Fear. A kind of wonder he didn't know how to hold. "No one's ever stood between me and trouble," he murmured. "Well," Clara said, lifting her chin, "there's a first time for everything." Outside, the riders slowed, spreading out in a semicircle along the fence line. A voice yelled out, sharp, commanding, echoing across the field. "Colt Maddox! Come on out!" Colt's breath grew shallow. He gripped his revolver tighter. "Clara, please!" But Clara stepped forward, hands trembling yet determined. "You saved me once this morning. Let me return the favor." Before Colt could argue, she grabbed his arm and guided him toward the back room, pushing him gently onto the cot again. "Stay low," she whispered. "But stay low." Colt froze, caught between pain, frustration, and reluctant trust. Clara closed the door quietly, hard hammering, and faced the front of the house as fists slammed against it. "Open up!" another voice barked. Clara steadied her breath. She had survived grief. She had survived loneliness. She would survive this too. Her hand tightened on the worn doorknob as she whispered to herself. "For years, I lived afraid of losing what I had left, but today, I'm choosing to fight for something new." She unlocked the door and stepped outside,